of man's personal energy. It tells us about his enthusiasms, his interests, and his attitudes. It gives us something of the degree of specialization in which his life will be patterned. Then this is compared with another very great factor, and that is his energy allotment. And basically this allotment was anciently based upon the position of the sun in the relationship of the great year. Thus, as truly we have distribution of available energy in the seasons, persons born in these seasons have certain energy peculiarities. And not long ago there was a published list of accidents on the Bay Bridges in San Francisco, and it was pointed out that the accident rate is entirely erratic and breaks all laws of accidental probabilities. Instead of these accidents occurring according to a patternless sequence, these accidents are highly patterned. And by the study of them, it becomes immediately obvious that the accident is not an accident, that it is based upon certain energy problems, that the individual at the wheel is much more likely to go to sleep and have an accident, or is much more likely to have slow reflexes and have an accident. All these things are determined apparently by energy allotments. Thus the sun to the ancient was the symbol of man's energy allotment, its relationship to him, its effect upon him, and the bridge between the sun in the heaven and the source of life light in man. This bridge was always regarded as the nativity, the symbol, the horoscope, the sign by means of which certain actual calculations of the availability of energy resources could be made. Now, better calculations may be made in the future, but we view with considerable interest the audacity of the ancient, who long before the dawn of science actually did fashion a bridge by means of which he sought to measure the life power in man and the peculiar action of this life power in various men, not merely in an empiric situation. From energy allotment, then, we come to the conclusion that two kinds of persons do exist. Those who by nature are essentially positive, and those by nature essentially negative. Now, by negative and positive, we do not mean good and bad, nor do we mean strong and weak, nor do we mean helpful and helpless. These are not the applications, because, as the Chinese and East Indians pointed out long ago, the greatest mystery of all is the mystery of negative energy, not positive energy. Now, up to the present moment, we have considered negative energy merely that part of energy which we do not understand. Negative energy may also be that part to which we do not immediately respond. It may also be that part of energy not yet explored. And if that is what is meant, then indeed the negative energy is the greater part, because we know hardly a fraction of what must ultimately be known about these subjects. But negative energy is in some way what we might term a spiritual energy. It is negative as we now view all spiritual things, because they are not immediately visible to us. It is negative because it does not help us to get rich. That is, not obviously. And anything that does not help pay bills is not only negative, it is a luxury in these times. It is termed negative also because it forces man into one of the most disagreeable relationships he can endure, and that is into his own company. Negative energy is energy which has by its tendency a motion inward or away from objectivity. Negative energy, therefore, to us may be little more than a vacuum, but it is this vacuum that it conceals the mystery of deity. All things moving upon the levels of positive energy are very obvious in their functions. The individual gets up, rolls up his sleeves, and does things. But what does he do? What is the final result of what he does? Usually his own destruction. By positive energy, he is led from one excess of action to another. Also, of course, he is led to a certain degree of material accomplishment. It is not that we should discount so-called objective energy. It is that we should recognize that, like nearly everything else that makes up our modern pattern, it is of secondary importance elevated to first place. That this so-called positive energy is leading us into a quantitative victory over the unknown, whereas what is termed negative energy is the secret of our qualitative victory. And on this we have very little knowledge or thought at the present time. Nearly all solutions to all problems arise from the individual who is able to become adjusted receptively to truth. Receptive adjustment, therefore, makes use of a kind of energy which is different from that which is used in material objective adjustment. Actually, receptivity appears to use less energy. Actually, it uses more of a very refined kind of energy, because receptivity is not negativity as we know it. What we call negative energy is simply an energy with a purpose which does not lie within the field of our ordinary experience. Yet upon this energy we must build, and we live because of it. Because our internal life is sustained by this energy in the same way that our external life is sustained by material energy. Therefore, out of the study of the effects of the universe upon man, we must ultimately come to the recognition that man has an internal life, which we may term a psychological life, and that this is subjected to laws other than the laws of matter. Our attitude today is that all influence that models or molds the internal life of man comes from the outside, and is made aware, and we are made aware of it, or it is visible to us because of the light of the sun shining upon it. Paracelsus declared emphatically that the interior life of man is also subject to energies and laws which are not obvious materially, and that the individual's inner life is subject to its own environment, the forces of it, and the energies sustaining it. If our outside life is in a quantitative environment, our inner life is in a qualitative environment. Consequently, our inner life has an existence of its own. And this existence also has a nativity, has an endurance in space, and is subject to a kind of energy pattern. What we call psychologically archetypes are more or less proofs of this. For archetypes are forms set up in a formless state. They are kinds of entities which are not materially available to us, yet they become the actual motivating symbolic energy powers by which conduct can be and is modified. Thus, in astrology, the ancients were firmly convinced that man possessed an internal being and that this internal being was subject to laws that must be discovered, and that these laws are not just the laws of material existence, but are laws relating to the controlled direction of electrical and magnetic phenomena. That the spiritual life of man operates in a field of energy, just exactly as the material life of man operates in a field of phenomena. That we must understand this energy, and must most of all adjust to it. The inner life of man has a normal or an abnormal adjustment with its own energy fields. When the inner life of man is completely the result of the pressure from the lower outer life of man, then this inner life is imprisoned, locked within a situation for which it was not intended. There was never a time in nature when nature intended the lesser to govern the greater. There was never a time in the constitution of man when it was assumed that the outer life of man could satisfactorily regulate his inner life. In every instance, the inner life must regulate the outer. Authority must be vested in that which is superior. When, therefore, the outer life of man affecting the internal life makes it difficult or impossible for the psychic field to operate normally in manifestation in this world, we have a psychotic. We have a false situation whenever we try to force that which is less upon that which is intrinsically more. Also in this situation, we have the continual fact of the need for the psychic life of man to keep the laws of the psychic life of the universe. Man who breaks the material laws of nature is punished physically. When man's entity or selfhood comes out of adjustment with universal energy, he is punished inwardly or metaphysically. He is punished by a series of invisible ailments that are as dangerous to him as physical ailments are to the body. Paracelsus pointed out that every ailment known to the body has its equivalent in the psychic field of man, and that it is just as easy for the individual to be sick psychically as it is physically. But he did not affirm, and neither did the other ancients, that all psychic sickness arises from the personality. He assumed that psychic sickness arises from psychic disobedience, in the same way that physical sickness results from physical disobedience. And psychic disobedience is in harmony between the energy field of man and the great universal field which must nourish it. In harmony of this kind may and does arise from several possible causes. The most common cause would be paralleling that of physical ailments, namely that the individual's psychic field is unable to form a natural, proper adjustment with its own source of nutrition. That wherever this occurs, you have psychic stress. And wherever this occurs, you have something else that causes it. And the thing that causes it would be the equivalent of egoism or egotism. The individual who stands against the law, the individual who believes or thinks that he does not have to obey, the individual who takes an attitude of aggressive egoism in forcing his own concepts upon nature. His punishment for his arrogance is exactly what occurred to the builders of the Tower of Babel. As most ancient physicians and some schools of modern medicine point out, the greatest single cause of sickness is obstruction, that by means of which natural function is impaired. Bodily obstruction due to tension will impair body function and reduce health. Psychic tension in the form of psychic stress interferes with the distribution of energy on the psychic plane and makes possible the development of psychic ailments.